Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Charlie Kim or Chehwan Kim, and today we're going to have a debate lecture on AP or World Schools Debate. Regarding this channel, I'm planning to upload many of these videos from now on because I like debating. About myself, I've been debating since the first grade of elementary school, so that's around 11 years. I debated for a long time in big hagwons for a consistent amount of time. And I was recently, I guess, or maybe still am, a World Schools Debating Championship Team Korea in the second team, that's Team B, and I was ranked as the ninth best speaker of the nation. So that was a short thing about me, and we're going to start with today's lecture on the basics of AP debate. The goal of these lectures is to make watching and learning about debate accessible for everyone, because I always spent a lot of money trying to learn debate, and it wasn't super easy to do that. So I'm going to try to make videos that are understandable for anyone that's wanting to try, and actual tips that can help people when they're trying to do AP debate, or if they just want to think logically or speak logically. So today we're going to start with AP debate. So what is an AP debate? This isn't like advanced placement. This is called an Asian parliamentary debate. And obviously debate is something that you talk about as either a pro or a con. A pro would be supporting a motion. A motion is like a resolution, a topic, and con would be opposing the resolution, or it's called a motion in an AP debate. But the thing is, we don't call this pro or con, or af or neg. It is most common to say prop or op. And prop is going to be a proposition that proposes the motion, and op is going to be opposition that opposes the motion. So we call this prop and op. And in this debate, Asian parliamentary is a specific type of debate. So it's not just the debates that you see on TV or debates that are often done in school. It's a specific format and an academic format. All right. So it isn't actually super Asian. Like you're not going to see much Asian roots in there. It was created in Asia, I believe, and it's used in big Asian tournaments, but you don't need to focus on this word. You don't need to focus on parliamentary either, because it's, I guess, kind of a parliamentary debate, but I think parliamentary debates are actually simpler than this. So this is just fluff terminology. Doesn't matter that much. So that's why we just call it AP debate. Where are we going to see AP debate? So in Korea, we have this tournament called YTN Hubs, which is a very big tournament. I believe the biggest national tournament for ES and MS. They used to be in high school division, but now it's elementary and middle school only. And you're going to see the format in this tournament. And I guess some other big tournaments are called like UADC, the United Asian Debate Championship, which is the biggest one in Asia. It's for university students. And AP debate is also common in many Asian countries. But really, it's common in almost any country, or like it's a global format because you often see the term WSDC. This is the World Schools Debating Championships. But this is basically the same thing as AP debate because AP debate has a little bit shorter speech time. World schools would just be a little bit longer speech time. So we'll learn about this format. Now, before we go into like rules and stuff, why do we do AP debate and like what values does it have just as a format? The first thing that I would say is that this is not a speech format. So if you see a speech, you're going to see very fancy words and fancy styles. But in AP debate, you might see that, but it is not necessary. You don't need to do it. So you're not going to see much fancy wording and or intuitive styles. It's going to be logic based. So when you're scoring a speech score and when you're trying to decide who won and lost the debate, that's called a verdict. It's going to be very logic based. So the content matters and the persuasiveness of the content matters. And you might think that, oh, speech and also content matters, but speech is also focused on how well you speak, how you speak. AP debate is really not much about that, especially at the elite and higher level. You might have seen formats like the public forum debate, or I guess just a format that you think of when you do debates. Now, these two things are different from AP debate in the sense that first they have a cross-examination. If you're Korean, 교차조사. So they have these things called a cross-examination. Well, AP debate is, I guess, unique, I guess, in the fact that it does not have this. What you're going to see is speeches. So just to compare it, it's going to feel like speech after speech after speech after speech. And instead of cross-examination, you have this thing called POIs, which is another way to ask questions, but it's really less important. People say it's important and people say it's fun. It's not as important, like compared to cross-ex, because cross-examination is like the main event of public forum. But POI is really just a side thing. It's not that important. So, yeah, that's pretty different. And one important thing also, I said it's not like speech because style doesn't matter that much. And it's also not like public forum in the sense that evidence doesn't matter that much. If you see a public forum debate, you're going to have this thing called a card where there's a bunch of evidence written by university professors and big universities. You're not going to do that in AP debate. You're not going to care about facts or statistics or these empirical evidence that much. So what does matter in an AP debate? It's about logic, like I said. But what do I mean by logic? So a logic would be something that is deductible from facts that are widely known. So logic is going to explain why something is generally true in most cases, and it's going to be this flow from A to B to explain why something is generally true. But I think we all know what a logic is. Just think it as having a bunch of logic without the empirical evidence. Examples are used, but are not absolutely necessary. I mean, if you see elites debates and the best debates, you're going to see a bunch of examples. But I'm saying that it's not necessary, as in the sense it is very necessary in public forum debates. And these examples come from generally accessible knowledge. In debate, we call this like the AIV. In debates, we call this the average intelligent voter. So things that average intelligent voter knows, an average intelligent person would know. So just basically common sense. So examples are just used by the common senses that we know. For example, you're going to know that South Korea is a very IT developed technology. That's common sense. You can use that as an example. But it's really, really focused on logic and being logically strong. Um, just a short explanation. I guess logic, arguments would matter. Rebuttals will matter. And then weighing those logics, our team versus your team, would matter. So that's just a briefing on what the spirit of AP debate is. And now we're going to go into specifics. So how are the rules made? Like I said, there's a prop side and an op side. In the prop side, you have something called a prime minister. You also have the deputy prime minister and government whip. You have the government reply. Op, you're going to have the leader of opposition, the deputy leader of opposition. You have the opposition whip. The opposition reply. Now, first things first, this looks like a lot, but it's really nothing. So we use terms like prime minister. This is like a position in government, and we use terms like the whip, which is like also position in a political party. It doesn't relate to anything. You're not doing anything. It's not an MUN, so you're not gonna talk about your own country or anything. So these are just terms, or fluff terms. You're also gonna see the word government here. Government is the same thing as prop. So I believe in the past we used more terms like pro and con, and in the past we said government more. I think the current trend is to say prop and op way more. And it's also a current trend not to use these terms because these days we just say first prop, second prop, Personally, I don't like saying this either. So what I usually do is I don't write it like this. I just say PM. I say PM, DPM, GW, and GR. You would call this GovWhip more normally, but GW would be fine. And then we would call this LO, DLO, OffWhip, off reply. Okay, so what happens here is that the debate starts with a PM speaking, then the LO speaking, then the DPM speaking, the DLO speaking, GovWhip speaking, the OffWhip. So it's a back and forth. But the only change, which you also see in other debate formats, is that the government speaks last. So you have the OR and then the GR. So now you're probably get the hang of it. It's a logical type of format. And then these are speeches that are given in this order. Okay, so more specifically, a traditional AP debate will have 7-minute speeches. So each speaker will speak 7 minutes. So a PM speaks 7 minutes, LO speaks 7 minutes. And in all AP formats, you're going to see these two guys, OR and the GR, they are the replies. They speak for half of the time of other speakers. So in this case, it'll be around 4 minutes. However, in Korea, it's more common to speak 6 minutes. So in Korea, you're going to see a lot of 6 minutes PMs and LOs, DPMs, DLOs, and 3-minute off reply GR. But the speech times really vary by competition. Like you might see a 4-minute reply. And in elementary school, if you're an elementary school student, you'll see 4-minute speeches. Okay. Well, that's the speech time. What are the roles of these speakers? We're only going to go to the basics. So PM, the role is to basically, it's a speaker that gives like a persuasive oratory speech. So you're going to start the debate. You obviously need to set up the debate. So what is setting up the debate? This is something that's very difficult to explain, just setting up the debate. And if you're a beginner debater, I don't think you should stress about this too much because this is something that is very difficult. But to explain a little bit, and if you're a beginner at setting up debates, let's say that the motion is this house will ban social media for children under 16. You have a motion like this and you want to set up the debate. What you want to do is just talk about the words of the motion inside of the motion and the context of the motion. So, for example, you would set up the debate by saying that Australia recently passed a law that bans social media for children under the age of 16. You might want to say that this motion is a this house would ban motion, so this is about a policy in general. And you might want to set some parameters like social media is not Google. Social media includes platforms that have a social aspect to it, like Instagram. You might want to say that children are like irrational actors and like minors, but it doesn't matter that much. Just say what you need to. So I really want to stress this if you're starting the debate. So what I would care more about is giving a good argument if you're a beginner debater. So what is an argument? An argument is a reason why you support the motion. So let's say the motion is this house of ban smoking. The reason why I support the motion is going to be because smoking is unhealthy and because smoking harms other people that have to go to secondhand smoking. So that's pretty obvious. That's what a PM does. Nothing like difficult. So that's what a PM does. And now you're going to think, does LO does the same thing? Yeah. Yes, they do. LO does the same thing. But what many beginners, debaters forget is you need to rebut to the PM. That is a must. Unless you want to be like a bad debater, that is a must. Like there are LOs that don't do that. That's not a good idea. So rebut to the PM and also give your speech. You might be thinking, that's too many things to do, but it's kind of just how debates are. Next, we have the DPM. The first things first, we know this is PM and this is the deputy of the PM, but it does not mean a DPM is less important than a PM. That's not how it works. They are equally as important. And I would probably say more important, especially in like a not super elite level. So let's look at a DPM. There's only one thing that I'll say here, it's rebuttal. So an LO talked about how smoking is actually healthy and it helps your health. That's obviously wrong. So you're going to say that they're wrong and that their case isn't important, that their case is weak and our case is better. That's what a rebuttal is. We'll go into specifics later. This is just for beginners and just like what AP is. So you're going to rebut against their case. And an argument is also given, which is optional. You don't need to give a third argument. Like unless your tournament director said that you need to give the argument, it is optional these days. So your PM should have given two arguments, and LO should have given two arguments. A third argument here, you don't need to. When would you give it and when would you not? I would say just when you want to, really. If you have something important to say, and if that argument is A, important enough, and B, you think the whip and reply are going to talk about it, then it means something, then do it. If you think that that argument is filler, it's weak, and the whip and reply is likely going to ignore that and just talk about the two or I guess four former arguments, including what the LO and DLO said and what the PM and what the LO and the PM said. If you think it's unimportant, then don't do it. Doesn't matter that much. And DLO, exact same thing. The only difference, I guess, is DLO is supposed to rebut against the PM and DPM, but obviously you need to rebut against their points that are still living and still standing. Now I move on to whips. So what is a gov whip? If you're beginning debate, whips are going to look very abstruse and very difficult, and it is pretty difficult for anyone. The thing that I would talk about whip is you're supposed to compare two teams. So you're the prop team, you compare it against yourself against the op team. And when you're comparing these two cases, you say that your team is stronger than the other team because debate is not comparative. And I should have told you earlier, maybe it's kind of obvious, but one team loses, one team wins. And in debates, there's no draws. There's only one team win, one team lose in an AP debate. And it's really important to win the debate because when you win a debate, that means that you get a point. And in a tournament, there's going to be a prelims, which is prelims, and the elims. And if you get a point, that's really good in prelims. And if you don't get a point, that's really bad in prelims because it decreases your chance of going to the elims, which is called breaking. So you really want to win. And in elims, if you win, you advance. If you lose, you go home. So more than anything, more than your speaker scores, like individual scores, winning is much more important. But that was tangents. So when you compare the two teams, you use something called a clash. Now, what is a clash? Clash means like fighting, right? But in this case, a clash is called a topic where two teams disagree on. I would say that there are two types of clashes. One is one impact versus another impact. So back to the dishausa ban smoking motion, the clash can look like health versus freedom. This is one type of clash. Another type of clash is which side promotes health better. Now let's look at these two clashes. So I think you can tell the difference. This is just talking about health. This is also talking about health and freedom. So in this clash, I don't think there's a preference for judges or debaters. You can do it, float your boat. But in this clash, obviously the side without smoking, which is going to be the prop side, is going to win this clash. So if you're doing this type of clash, then you also need to compare at the end of the day why health is better than freedom anyway. So maybe if you were whip doing this type of clash, another clash would be which side promotes free more. And you're gonna say that either the clash is a draw, or you can just say, I guess, this clash is super unimportant. Or just as a whip speech, you can have a section saying that health is better than freedom anyway. So that's that. And if you're whip doing this type of clash, you can just say health is better than freedom. And just that's what clash is. Simple enough. You might think that, oh, so in a clash, it's just filled with rebuttals. Basically, yeah. There's not much denying that. It's just rebuttals and structured in a different way. But what I would say is it might be a little bit more than rebuttals because you also need to do something called weighing. Weighing is also for another lecture video, but weighing would basically mean explaining why your case is better than theirs in a logical way. Why your case is better. So you would want to have both rebuttals and weighing in a whip speech. That's enough explanation for today. An op whip will obviously do the same thing, but the only difference would be that more speakers spoke ahead of you. These 5 speakers would have spoke ahead of you, so comparing might be a bit more difficult. But yeah, that's it. Now, what are replies? The first thing about replies is that they're half the speech length, but they also get half the speaker score. And you might think that it's unfair because replies get half the speaking time. Well, that's not exactly the case because if you look at the team, there are 4 rows, but there's actually only 3 people. And one person is going to do 2 rows, and that person would do the reply. A reply cannot be the whip. A reply can only be the speaker that spoke in PM or DPM. So, for example, I might be a PM and also do a reply speech, or I might be a DPM and also do a reply speech. A reply speaker, I like using this sentence to describe a reply, is explaining why our team has already won the debate. So, until the speech before me, or when comparing these 6 speeches, why our team has already won. I think we see speeches like replies in just anywhere. I guess you can call it the conclusion speaker, the summary speaker, or in public forum, we call it the final focus speaker. So it's giving a holistic review on why already won. Holistic, in case you don't know what this means, it means like a way that talks about the entirety of the debate, not just a small aspect, the entire part of the debate. What many debaters often confuse and mistake is that, so we just give a summary? That's not really true. So, for example, if a reply speech is just giving a summary of all the speeches, that's not going to be too good. You give a summary, and then with the short summary, you explain why team won. You might be thinking, well, how do I do that? And my answer would be, there are so many ways to do that. And it's quite complicated, but you don't need to follow a structure. So if you kind of know what to do and you have something to say, just go with the flow. So, for example, hey, their team, this point was not important, and our point already defeated that point, and our point was better than their point because of these reasons. Like, just these things are going to be in your head, so just say that. That's fine. And there's also something called meta debating. Meta debating is talking about how the debate went, as in how the speakers did a good job debating. So, hey, their side didn't take any POIs, or their side had these logical fallacies, or their side actually missed so many rebuttals, or their side has contradictions. But even that, you don't need to do if that's not your thing. If you reply and you absolutely don't know what to do, just do the same thing that a DPM, do the same thing that a good whip does. That's fine. But as long as you're being holistic and as long as you're being retrospective on why you have already won, just you can use clashes, you can use rebuttals, that's totally fine. The only difference is, not the only difference, but an important difference is in a reply speech, you cannot give new rebuttals. So new rebuttals means any rebuttals that haven't come out in the past. So these guys can do new rebuttals, but reply would have to recycle rebuttals that these speakers have already given. So there's no new rebuttals. No new arguments either, obviously. You can use new examples if you want. You can have a similar way of explaining, and you can have provide new like vision and new metrics that the judge should view this debate, but that cannot be new rebuttals. And that's going to be it because it's probably already very confusing for people that haven't debated ever. Any things that I would want to talk about when introducing AP debate to new speakers? I talked about the win and loss. I guess we should talk about individual scores. So, verdict, the win-loss. It's a very binary system. Then you have indiv scores. An individual score is scored from a 60 to an 80. And it's scored on matter, manner, and method. It is often called content, style, strategy. A matter is what you said. So if I said that smoking is bad because it is unhealthy, that would be a matter. If your content gets a high score, that means that you had good logic. And if your content had a bad score, that means your logic was not that persuasive. The style would be how stylistically you speak and how well you speak. And you might be thinking, hey, you just told me that speech style doesn't matter. It does not matter. It does not matter, but it's just there. But judges don't follow it strictly. It's just there. It mattered 20 years ago. It mattered 15 years ago. Now it doesn't. Meta strategy is basically what debate strategies you used, but this is going to be very confusing for beginners, so don't think about it. This is just introductory. So it's 60 to 80. Supposedly, 70 is supposed to be like the average. So if you fulfill the roles somewhat, you get a 70. A 69 would be not as good. 68 would be pretty bad. Or if you're a beginner, you'll probably get a 68 or 67 if you try. 71 would be pretty strong arguments and rebuttals. 72 would be used great strategy as well. 73 would be some of the best high school debaters would get a 73 or a 74. These would be like the best high school debaters. And I guess I often get like a 72 or 72.5. And yeah, if you see more average debaters, they get a 69 or 70. Basically, that's it. You're not going to see a 78. You're not going to see like a 62. That's not really common. For anyone starting debate, anything I would like to talk about? Marginalia, maybe? What is the marginalia? The margin? I think it's called just margin. Margin would be how close the debate was. So in a speech a score sheet, you're going to have these guys. Let's say he gets a 70. He gets a 70 also. He gets a 70.5. And like I said, these are scored as a half score, so like a 35. That's a 69. That's a 69. These guys pretty fast. You get 68 to 34.5. You're going to add up the scores, and you're going to add up these scores. And the teams with the higher higher speaker scores, is going to win the debate. In this case, it'll be prop. So the prop score minus the off score will be the margin. And you might be thinking, then as long as you get high speaker scores, does that mean we win the debate? Technically, yes, but really no. Because first you would decide, as the judge, you would decide the win-loss of the debate, and then you would give the speaker scores. So, yeah. How is the win-loss decided, you may ask? It's decided by the clashes that I explained in WHIP. So a clash, in this case, would be which side did a better job in doing this. And be like, for example, which side promotes public better, which side promotes freedom better. I mean, if the judge divides the clash like this, then obviously prop's going to win. Obviously, op is going to win. But then what would matter is how clearly the prop has won this clash and how clearly the op has won this clash. And the next thing that will matter, or I guess something that equally matters, would be which clash is more important. So was health treated as more importantly, or was freedom treated as more importantly in the debate? The judge always is impartial and fair and only decides the results based on what actually happened within the debate. So that's how win-loss is decided. I guess the last thing that I would like to talk about is the motion. The motion would be this House would. You're going to see this term a lot. This is basically saying banning smoking should be done by the government. So we're going to ban that with a governmental policy that is passed in a parliament. It's called a policy motion. We're also going to see THBT, as in this House believes that something is true. It's called a value motion. And these are the most common ones. There are a bunch of other types, but they're very complicated and very difficult to understand and annoying for beginner debaters. So just know that the debate motion looks like this. It starts with this house. House isn't like a parliament. But note that it's just jargon. Like, for example, you're not going to make arguments about the parliament. You're not going to say that politicians will do something. That's not something that's going to be done, because it's not like these debates are about laws anyway. For example, you can have very ridiculous motions. The South believes that just some random thing is like SpongeBob is a good character. Like the motion might be this, because there are many unserious debate motions as well. And you're not going to talk about, oh, our parliament and politicians believe that SpongeBob is. You're not going to do that. So just take this part as jargon, and just anything after that matters much more. And there are obviously, okay, these might matter because of the rules of debate and the specific rules of AP debate, but we'll go into that later. So these are a basic introduction to AP debate. And since this is the first lecture, I can talk about some benefits of AP debate. Just quickly. AP debate, you're gonna have stronger logic because it's all about logic and making your logic stronger. So you're going to be smarter. There's also knowing about diverse topics, because debate motions have a wide range of topics, and you're going to learn about politics, philosophy, history, and other topics such as social movements, sports, culture. Sometimes it's about romance, sometimes it's Asia, Africa, Europe, international relations. Sometimes it's about art or just video games, anything. It's about anything. So you get to know a lot about diverse topics. All right. Now, English speaking skills, this would only help if you're like 12, 11 years old, because you're able to speak confidently, yes. You're able to speak for a long time, yes, because you're going to have to speak for 6 minutes consecutively. You're going to learn how to speak with less stage fright, I guess. That's a yes. But are you going to speak like a comedian? No. Are you going to speak like a politician? No. Are you going to speak like a very good teacher or like a very good public speaker? No. Because this is a kind of. Because if you want to speak like a really nice, like eloquent orator, then you want to do public speech instead of AP debate. So it'll help with your child's or your English speaking skills if your child is, around the age from 6 to 12. So it is a kind of. What are the benefits? You're going to learn, I mean, these are really big benefits. You get to become a lot smarter. But other benefits, I guess, meeting friends that do debate, which is fun. Kids that like debate. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for watching. My goal is to my goal is to upload videos daily, or at least a lot of videos, because I want to talk a lot about debating and around about debate topics and skills. Next lecture will probably be about skills, probably be about arguments, how to give arguments. So I'll see you then. Thank you.